On this quick video, we'll discuss a bit more about Shipa's concept of an application landing pad for your cloud-native applications. It's no news that over the last couple of years, organizations and teams have been spending time on migrating existing applications to a microservice architecture, building new applications using microservice, and many of these organizations are now looking at implementing Kubernetes, while some already started on this journey and others are at a scaling stage. That migration to microservices and Kubernetes also helped establish a more mature ecosystem, where you see important tools such as CI/CD, monitoring, and others taking an important place in the development workflow. The goal with all that, ultimately, is to enable faster delivery of applications. But as companies and teams now scale this architecture, it's important to ask what happens when applications are deployed in that scenario. If we look at a single three-tier application with a web server, the application code, and a database, when deployed, it creates up to a dozen objects inside Kubernetes, objects that may not be directly tied to the application pod itself, but rather independent objects distributed and created in my cluster. A very common scenario we see is companies using multiple clusters for reasons such as better isolation, security, application locality, and others. While the approach definitely helps with these topics, it creates more complexity as different clusters will introduce different objects, because these clusters may use different storage vendors, ingress controllers, and others, making it harder for both developers and platform engineers to develop infrastructure agnostic applications, quickly deploy them across clusters, and support it post-deployment. And now, as companies scale their applications and cloud-native infrastructure, they're facing this problem at scale and will continue increasing. At Shipa, we call this lack of application context, and we believe teams should address it now to not allow it to become an even bigger problem as they scale. Talking to many organizations and teams, this lack of application context brings issues such as policy enforcement across applications and objects becomes challenging, and the platform engineering team is directly responsible for that. And the lack of it can bring a large impact not only to the application but to the organization as a whole. Developers don't really want to spend time learning and creating Kubernetes objects, which is very understandable, since the value of the deliverables is on the delivering application rather than Kubernetes objects. This is decreasing the developer experience and speed when delivering applications, which is also becoming a responsibility and a task of the platform engineering team to improve it. Platform teams now are facing scalability challenges to manage individual objects rather than managing the application as the overall context. And last but not least, this all leads to longer time required to support and recover applications by the platform engineering team, which can again impact multiple teams across the organization. And it's interesting when discussing with these multiple companies and teams to see that around 47% of their time is still tied to managing Kubernetes, infrastructure, integration, and others, rather than focusing on the application itself. As mentioned before, developer experience has been impacted in the organization, and platform and SRE teams are facing increasing challenges on supporting and scaling applications. Based on that, Shipa then created the concept of an application landing pad. When you look at a landing pad, from a platform engineering team perspective, you can create multiple landing pads, or pools as we call it internally in the platform, and each pool can contain different configurations that will be automatically enforced or applied when applications are deployed. So the platform engineering team doesn't have to check each individual app, create policies for each individual object or resource, configure external integrations and so on, but rather focus on configuring the landing pad. Then Shipa will take care of every configured aspect once applications are deployed. Configurations for a landing pad can include things such as security scan levels and exceptions, if any, that should be applied on both scenarios when applications are deployed and ongoing post-deployment. Which libraries and languages developers can use when deploying applications to that specific pool, allowing platform engineering teams to build control all the way to the library version and programming language used by the applications deployed to that pool. Services such as databases, queuing, and others that can be available to be easily consumed by applications in that pool So you don't have to spend hours trying to understand how these services integrate with Kubernetes and how you can attach them to each application for your developers. Storage volumes that can also be attached to the pool and made available to applications to consume without having to learn how to create PVs, PVCs, YAMLs, and others. Which clusters that pool and applications deployed to it can use, such as EKS, GKE, AKS on premises, and others, making it really infrastructure agnostic to your application. From a development perspective, Shipa does not introduce any changes to the development workflow, but rather it connects to your existing CI/CD pipeline, and instead of delivering directly to production clusters and taking the risk of changing the state of your cluster with applications that do not conform to the specifications defined by the platform team, DevSecOps, and others, the CI/CD pipeline delivers the application code to the Shipa landing pad, which in turn ensures all is correct and performs the application deployments itself in the cluster of choice, automatically create and configuring all required objects. One of the main points is that developers won't need to write a single Kubernetes object file, which will allow a platform engineering team to deliver on the premise of a strong developer experience, while empowering the development team to deliver faster and more secure. Developers will be finally free to focus on delivering applications rather than focusing on Kubernetes. At the end, Shipa and its concept of an application landing pad enables platform engineering teams to deliver an enhanced developer experience and speed while ensuring a control environment is in place for better control, support, and scalability.